Hi everyone, good afternoon. As usual, I will be giving just a minute to allow you guys to come in before we start the business of the day. How have you guys been? Those on break, how is the break going on? Those working at home remotely, hope it's been fun, and those in the office, hope working in the office has been fun as well. Today is a good day. Just sit tight and flow according to the tune of our cybersecurity presentation. I bet you it's gonna be great.
Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to Understanding Cybersecurity. Our webinar today is being put on by Temple University's Small Business Development Center. Temple University's Small Business Development Center is hosted by Temple's Fox School of Business, which has been serving the small businesses of Philadelphia, Eastern Montgomery, and Lower Berks counties since 1983. Our mission is to provide entrepreneurs and business owners the knowledge needed to make smart decisions and to prosper. I'm Sheila Bishop, a business consultant with the SBDC. I have more than 35 years of IT experience in just about every field there is in IT. My most recent position before joining the SBDC was as VP of Monitoring Services Operation at Bank of America. I have a BA in computer science from Temple University, and I'm a dog owner and an inveterate knitter. Today, our agenda is we're going to talk a little bit about what is cybersecurity. We're going to go over some common threats, and then we're going to talk about what you can do to secure your system. So, cybersecurity is the practice of protecting networks, servers, and all internet-connected devices from unauthorized access and malicious attack. How you handle and protect your data is central to the security of your business. Every business should plan for the unexpected, including the threat of the loss and theft of data. This is especially true in our increasingly connected world. The Internet of Things refers to the network of connected objects able to connect and exchange data using embedded sensors. We all now live in smart homes, drive smart cars, and wear wearables that keep us constantly connected to the internet. Even our baby monitors and our doorbells all connect in now. And while they make our lives easier and more enjoyable, cyber criminals love them just as much as we do because they give them more points of access. So why do we need cybersecurity? To protect the business's reputation, to limit the liability of your businesses, and to reduce the cost of recovering from a cyber crime. When we think of some of the big companies that we've come to know and trust, many of them have been hurt in recent years by cyber criminals. In 2017, Equifax was hacked, and over 147 million people's credit information was stolen. In 2013, Target was hacked, and 40 million people's credit card data was stolen, and 70 million customer records were taken. In 2011, Sony's PlayStation network, all the personal information of pretty much everyone who had signed up for Sony's PlayStation, 77 million account holders' data was all taken. And all of that had a monetary impact on those businesses, but it also a really strong reputational impact to those businesses. I know after that, I was a little hesitant to go to Target and use my credit card because it makes you think, what kind of protection do they have in place to keep my data secure? And that's one of the biggest things that our customers expect. They expect you to keep their data secure. Putting cybersecurity in place also increases employee productivity because the time you spend putting cybersecurity in place greatly reduces the time you would spend recovering from any attack. So we talk a lot about malware. Cyber criminals seek to exploit human or security vulnerabilities to attain goods or money. And some of their motivations are financial gains. They're looking to be recognized and to make a name for themselves in kind of that criminal underworld. And a lot of them are politically motivated and state motivated. And the drivers they think it's fun, they're doing it for profit, they're doing it to cause harm. And there's multiple types of malware, and we're going to go over each of those in the coming slides. One we often hear about is viruses, and viruses are a form of malicious software. Viruses attach themselves to other programs, alter the host code, replicate themselves, and when this replication succeeds, that program is said to be infected. And when it runs, that program then goes on to that allows it to infect other programs and spreads through your environment that way. Just like a virus in a human body or an animal body, finds a healthy cell, attaches itself, infects it, takes it over, and then spreads from that infected cell to other healthy cells. And that's basically how they got their name viruses, because they acted much in the same way as they do within an organism. Email is a popular method to spread viruses. They cause performance issues, and that's usually how they're detected, and they can cause billions of dollars of damage. So I'm kind of curious, have any of you ever been affected by any of these viruses? So I don't know, Casey, if anybody's responding.
Not yet, maybe give it a second.
Well, I will tell you that I personally came into work one day many years ago and had an email from some woman I worked with on a project like a year before with the title, "I love you," which really startled me. And I called my boss over and was like, how do I handle this? And as we were talking, you could hear throughout our department people starting to kind of react that they had also gotten similar emails, because a virus had gotten into the company, and it was the "I love you" virus. And if I had clicked on the link inside the email that was supposed to be the response, it would have run against my email contact list and sent the virus out to everybody in my email contact list. That's one that I actually had gotten in my lifetime, and that's how that one spread itself. So they definitely are insidious. Okay. So while a virus requires a host program to spread, worms do not require a host program. They generally will come in the same kind of way, through email, through infected media, that type of thing. But once they're in your system, they use recursive methods to copy themselves. So they don't need a host program to infect and then have somebody run it and spread. They just start replicating and replicating and replicating themselves, and they just end up then controlling more and more of your computer software. And they absolutely always cause harm, because they just consume more and more computer bandwidth as they replicate themselves more and more. So I didn't create a separate slide for worms, because they act very much like viruses, spreading through your organization, using up computer resources. It's really just how they end up replicating themselves. That's kind of one of the main differences between them. Next on our list of malicious software or malicious malware are rootkits. Rootkits are software designed to obtain access to an area of a computer system that's not otherwise authorized. For example, it's obtaining administrative access to a system where you should only have user access or maybe no access, right? And once it gets that administrative access or root access, it has a tendency to hide itself, because now it can change the permissions of the files, it can embed itself in the operating system, it can kind of cover its own tracks that it was ever installed. And while it's there, it can basically capture the traffic going through that system. It can steal passwords, user data, and use up computer resources. It can act like a bot and run programs, because now it's at the root of your system here, it has administrative access. One famous case of rootkits was the Sony BMG copyright protection rootkit. Right. Yeah, that's an example. We'll get to that one. That's an example of scareware. So we'll talk about that one in a minute. The Sony BMG copyright protection rootkit. Back before we all had iPhones and iPads, and you know, we all got so excited when we could burn CDs and share CDs of music, but the music industry wasn't too excited about that. So Sony decided what it would do is it would stop people from being able to burn their music onto CDs. So when it started to publish its music from that point on, it put copyright protection on them, but it also included a free music player that had a rootkit that came with it, and didn't tell people, didn't, you know, give people the chance to opt out. So when you put the disc into your computer to play music or, you know, whatever, it would also install this rootkit. And the idea was that if you tried to burn any music, any Sony music, even not on that CD, it would stop you because it would say it was copyrighted. But they're not allowed to do that. So there was, you know, action taken against them, and then they sent out supposedly a fix to take it back off, but the fix caused, you know, damage to people's operating system. So regardless to say, there was a big class action lawsuit against them, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, they had to pay everyone like $150 for the damage. So that wasn't them necessarily trying to steal data from you, but it's that same idea of, you know, you're putting in a disk, you're not knowing what it's doing under the covers, and suddenly you've given this other company, you know, access to your administrative rights to your system. So in 2021, we all learned a lot about ransomware, right? That's when Colonial Pipeline got shut down, when, you know, malicious actors took control of their systems. Ransomware is when a malicious actor denies access to business computer software files and demands ransom to restore that access. And it's generally done by encrypting the data, and the decryption key is paid when given when the ransom is paid. Now, the important thing to note there is what's given when the ransom is paid is the decryption key. The malware is still there, right? The malware that caused the files to be encrypted and the people to be able to take control of your system is still there. So once you've gotten access back to your system, there's a whole trail after that to you know, work on your systems to get this malware off your system, maybe rebuilding your whole system from scratch, and, you know, interrogating it to make sure that you're not, you know, bringing that virus on once you've done so. It's usually carried out by a Trojan, a file that's infected with, you know, a file that looks enticing, but it's infected with this virus, but it's made to look legitimate or useful. And again, the most famous case is Colonial Pipeline. So Colonial Pipeline is a great case study. If you ever really want to look into it, it's a really good case study on what not to do, right? They didn't have very good backups, right? So it wasn't like this got locked down and they said, great, let's get some new hardware in and we'll just restore from backup from a month ago when the malware wasn't there, and we'll start over. They didn't have that kind of backup that wasn't already infected. And the other thing is the way that people got in was that they got access to a user account that was not being used anymore, but hadn't been removed, which really highlights the need to keep your systems clean and any unused accounts, systems, files cleaned off your system so that they're not available to be an access point to a malicious user. Oh, and the other thing about ransomware is it turns out it's been down in the last few months because Bitcoin value has gone down. So I don't know if our inflation is a good thing or not, but it's decreased the effect of ransomware for right now. And then we have web-based attacks, right? I'm sure right now in this country, there's many denial of service attacks going on against especially big banks and the government and big targets like that. Denial of service and distributed denial of services, you're often hear these called DOS attacks, right? And they're basically the same thing, and almost all of them are now distributed denial of service attacks as opposed to denial of service attacks. They're meant to put so much traffic on a site that it'll bring the site down, right? They're meant to flood a system to crash it. So say you got really mad at your local cappuccino place, and you got everybody you know to go against their website at the same exact time, you know, and you know, and send them a query about a free coupon on their website, and hit it at the exact same time over and over and over and over and over and over again, like 9 million times a second, usually with bots, just to see if that site can hold that kind of traffic without starting to thrash and crash. And that's what they're trying to do with a distributed denial of service attack. Just send so much traffic to your server, to a system, that it's going to crash. Large banks and like I said, government generally have a firewall that keeps an eye out for any kind of unusual activity, like a big jump in activity coming in, and will shut down the traffic if they see this kind of attack taking place. Smaller companies, you know, you just really need to keep an eye out and have kind of those alerts in place to see if this is occurring. Another web-based attack is cross-site scripting. This kind of attack occurs if malicious code is submitted within a comment in a way that when a subsequent user's browser tries to display the comment, it ends up executing that code. And then that code is run on your server and can expose text, can run code on your server. It can actually take over your website and change the HTTP of your site, can, you know, basically put another site in your place, that type of thing. Online user forums and social media platforms are prime candidates if they're not properly secured against such attacks. You basically need to make sure that you're escaping any special characters to stop any code from being seen as code, and instead making sure it's always just seen as text. Websites that allow users to comment on information such as news articles are also prime targets of this. SQL injection is similar, but not the same as that. It uses similar tactics, but instead of trying to go and run code against your site, it's trying to run SQL directly against your database on your server and pull back your data from your database. A lot of times, even if this, again, you need to do the same thing, escape the text so that it's never seen as an SQL command, because SQL is like the query language of databases. So it's never seen as that, it's always just seen as text. You know, so SQL commands are, you know, rather than just regular data, if it's not protected against a SQL injection, the code will execute. And again, it could be seen as you know, that people can see your data, the data you don't want to present to them. So it could be, you know, account information for your customers, that type of thing. Path traversal allows people to access files and directories that are stored outside the root file. Again, so files you would have, you know, the stuff you have behind the scenes of your website that you don't want people to access. The flaw usually occurs when user parameters aren't sanitized or there is a lack of access control to the resources. So, you know, you need to make sure that that people can't just put things in after the URL that would allow them to escape into your actual directory structure. And then when we talk about access control, the idea is even if they got into your directory structure, make sure you have the right security on those files and directories, you know, that there's, you know, no read, no write for, you know, users that haven't been defined. So even if they got there, they couldn't see or do anything on your servers. This attack is also known as .. because that's generally how they get there, by doing like whatever you have as your website and then doing .. because that backs them up into your root directory, or directory traversal and directory climbing and backtracking.
We have one question.
Okay.
How can I protect my website when people put their email in it? Sorry, I'm a little confused by the question. Let's see. How can I protect my website when people put email in? Is it any way to protect my site?
Yeah, I don't know of a way to check if an email is like a legitimate email as opposed to just something they made up? Is that what the question is?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. Yes, she said yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that's considered generally a security issue as much as a data quality issue.
Sometimes if they
So-
don't have like a signature.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's something we can maybe take away and try to find out, but it's like I said, I think that's more of a data quality issue as opposed to like a cybersecurity, because I don't think they could do any harm to your website or your servers or that type of thing. But I understand why it's an issue, because now you have, you know, if you're trying to do a campaign or that type of thing, that data is not doing you any good. Is that the concern?
I believe so. Yeah, so although it may not affect your website, it's still dangerous, right, to open emails that are potentially, you know, bad emails. And I do actually have like a link to an article on that I could post, although it's not like necessarily related to the website. Like you were saying, it's still, you know, not good, right? Let's see, she said, when a person signs up, the email come to my email.
Okay, so this is email you're getting. How do you know if the email you're getting is legitimate?
I think that's what she's asking. I think she said she's texting and
Okay.
having a hard time doing that.
So some of the ways, and we'll talk about this, some of the ways when you get an email, if you see a link, how do you know if it's, okay, that's, okay, Casey put the link in there and that's good. And some of the ways you can tell if a fake is a fake email. We're going to talk about a little bit in some of the things to talk about when you're security. Be very careful about what domain they're sending you to, right? So if they say they're from Amazon, and it might say like amazon.com.net, right? That's not Amazon, right? If it says, I think somebody up ahead had said something about where Microsoft had said it was Microsoft because they were going to shut down their computer, and then he contacted Microsoft directly and they said, no, that's not them. That's always a safe bet if you get that type of email. But if it's something where, you know, you signed up and somebody sent you an email, and if there's any kind of link, you can usually generally hover over the link, right? And see what the actual URL is for that link, right? As opposed to just clicking directly on the link, you know, either hover over the link or, you know, highlight it and say, show me the URL for the link, and carefully observe where that link is going to take you to make sure it actually would be that correct site, especially in that first part. You know, is it really taking you to amazon.com or, you know, fbi.gov or, you know, ssi.gov, or is it taking you to ssi.gov.com. You know, li, right? That's not legitimate, right? So you do need to really scrutinize where people are trying to send you in those URLs, and you know, be a little suspicious of emails when you're not familiar with the sender. So hopefully that helped, and hopefully Casey's link helped. Okay, so the last one I wanted to talk about was man-in-the-middle attacks. With a man-in-the-middle attack, the bad actor actually inserts themselves between the two parties, and the goal is to steal the personal information as it travels between those two parties. So they're looking to steal like login information, financial data, personal or business data, and it's a form of session hacking. And other ways it could occur is called sniffing. And sniffing is when the attacker uses software to intercept the data, like literally intercept the data on the wire that's being sent from one device to the other. So it's really just capturing those packets as they flow by. If you have an encrypted channel between the two, so like if you're sending from your data from your website to, you know, the end user, and you're using SSL, then that's encrypted. So the sniffer is only going to see the encrypted data. There's not much they can do with it. If you're using a VPN, again, that data is encrypted, not much they can do with it. There's also evil twin, right, which is where an attacker duplicates a legitimate Wi-Fi network enabling them to intercept the data from the users who believe they're signing onto a real network. So this is like if you're at the airport and you think you're logging on to United Airlines Wi-Fi, or you're at Starbucks and you think you're logging on to Starbucks Wi-Fi, but you're actually logging on to the guy who's next to you, personal hotspot, who's spoofing, you know, that Wi-Fi. And that's a little more dangerous because you're probably just sending him every piece of information because you're connecting directly to his Wi-Fi. And that's why you need to be, again, a VPN would help, and just being very careful what you share when you're on a public Wi-Fi is very critical. So there's a kind of the more technical, technical attacks people can make, but a large amount of data is stolen just through social engineering and human errors, right? So phishing is, again, a big issue, and that's when fraudulent messages, much like that one that the gentleman received about, saying, this is Microsoft and I'm going to shut down your system, and they're designed to trick the receiver into revealing personal or sensitive information, or to deploy malicious software. So we had that one, and I've been getting these wonderful text messages from somebody saying they're Amazon and they're going to, I need to verify my Amazon Prime account, or they're going to stop me from buying stuff on Amazon. Now, again, there's so many grammar mistakes in these text messages. The URL they want me to click is not Amazon.com. It's like Amazon.io. something. That is not Amazon's URL. And the other thing is that makes absolutely no sense. Like, why would Amazon want me to stop buying things at Amazon? It's not, like the Social Security ones, at least, I guess if they wanted money from you, it made a little bit more sense. So you need to be very, when you get emails like that, and like the other person, just use a little common sense and say, is this make sense to me? This email I'm seeing, would a big company send out emails with this type of grammar issues, this type of spelling issues? Why would they not use their normal domain path? And again, you can, as the other gentleman did, contact the company directly and say, did you contact me about this? And that's how you can, if just either ignore the phishing, but if it does look like something you are concerned about, those are some things you can do to avoid being caught in a phishing scam. There's a couple other ways that phishing is defined: spear phishing and whaling. And spear phishing is when they go after a specific individual. So maybe they're not just going after anybody they can get, but they're going after Sally in accounts receivable because they want to get your accounts receivable information. And then there's whaling, which is when they want to go after the CEO, right? They want the big fish. You can also get malicious software by infected removable media. So if you're at a conference and there's so many of those free little thumb drives just everywhere, and they're one's shaped like a doggy, like one's shaped like a fish. I'm sure everybody has best intentions about those, and probably most of them are great, but they can also contain malware on them. So I will take them if I'm like at a vendor and they're giving them, but I never use them. Because again, they can be more than just great storage devices. They can be infected with malware. I will buy them and use them, but I will not just take the free ones and use them. Also, if you're at the mall and there's the charging stations, or even at a hotel and there's the charging devices, some of those not only provide power, but can also provide data, and that data can involve also viruses and worms. So just be cautious using those. There is an adapter you can get between them and your device that stops any data from coming through and will only ensure that only power comes through. So keeping your device safe from any software that any malware that would be attempted to be downloaded to your devices. There's also fake websites, and some of the same things I was talking about with how to kind of interrogate an email would come into play with some of these fake websites. And a lot of big organizations have been targets of these fake websites. Like there was an FBI.com website set up, which which is why I mentioned it before, versus FBI.gov, which is the legitimate website, right? And that's where you really need to look at that domain name. A few years ago, there was a kind of a scam where many DMVs were spoofed. Because that's a great place to get a lot of user information. Just think of all the information you have to give your DMV, your license, your social security, your address, your date of birth. So it was a great way for malicious actors to gather a lot of personal information on people. And even the BBC was spoofed, and there was like a fake BBC set up in front of it, and fake news was put in place. But a lot of other ways are just that kind of human error. A lot of data is just stolen, literally stolen, stealing PCs, stealing thumb drives, stealing the removable media and documents. So people impersonate maintenance workers, construction workers, computer repair people, and people let them in, and then they actually literally steal the data from your place, and they dumpster dive. And it might look like innocuous data to you, like an employee list. Might be very handy for them because now they have people and the roles that they play, and even their phone numbers. And so now they can call Bob and say, Sally from accounts receivable told me that I needed you to get this to me because I need to get it from Macy, their CEO. And now he's like, oh, they know all these names. They must be legitimate. Let me give her this information. And then there's scareware, which is also like what that gentleman had, which is you have to do this right now, or your computer's going to blow up, right? Or the IRS one was like that, right? You have to get this money to us, or the IRS is coming to arrest you. There's also scareware that's like you have to get this money to us, or your grandson's going to be arrested, right? And the whole idea of scareware is to use shock, anxiety, and threats to manipulate people into making bad decisions, right? To not having them take that pause to say, wait a minute, does this make any sense, right? And then there's just, again, the kind of the human error type things, right? Working on your laptop in a plane where you're so close to the other people, they can see exactly what you're working on, talking about company plans and policies in a public space where people can overhear them. I will tell you that if I'm on a plane and somebody's working on a laptop, I always look over to see what they're doing. Right? I'm just a nosy person, right? So just be aware of that. It may not be an issue, right? You may be working on the most innocuous spreadsheet, or you might be, just playing solitaire, but just be very aware that when you are out in public, talking about your business, working on your business, people are probably looking to see what you're doing. And that person who's looking might just be somebody who's nosy, or it might be somebody who could, use that information against you. So that's kind of all about the threats. Do we have any questions at this point? Or anything?
Someone just gave a really great resource award, and it was a resource. It's a website that can be used to test individual email addresses for whether they're actual email accounts.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
great.
It's a very nice resource to share.
Thank you for sharing that. We'll definitely capture that and add it to the presentation going forward. Thank you.
And I don't see any questions just yet, but I'll stop you if we see more.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so now that we talked about all the horrible threats that are out there, we'll talk a little bit about what we can do to try to mitigate them. Okay, so one of the first things we can do is if we have a website, right, we can make sure that we have our SSL certificate in place and that we're using SSL. Now, truthfully, we're probably not using SSL. We're probably using the transport layer security. It's a newer technology that went in, I forget how long ago, but most people still just refer to it as SSL, and that's what we're going to refer to it now. It's probably just easier to say than TLS, is my guess, why people still refer to it that way. It was developed in 1995 by Netscape. Probably most of you guys don't even remember Netscape at this point, but it was to ensure privacy and data integrity. And basically it sets up a secure channel between two machines. And you can determine if your site has SSL if HTTPS is ahead of your website address in the URL, or you see that little lock, right? The little lock up there by the URL. And it encrypts the data as it transfers between sites. And that's really what it does. It doesn't make sure your website's completely secure, right? We talked about all those other threats, like people embedding code in the comments and being able to get out to your files and stuff, but it makes sure that when the data is going from your site to the client, to the customer and back, that data is secure on that wire. So how it works is the client connects to the secure server. The server provides a digital certificate. The client confirms the authenticity of that digital certificate. There's a handshake occurs between that connection. The data is encrypted and starts to flow to the other side, and then it's decrypted on the other side with the session key, and then the connection closes. If someone grabs that session key, it's not going to do them any good. It's never going to be used again. It's a kind of a one and done type situation. So you're probably looking at this and thinking, how many rules does this woman have about password management, right? But passwords are one of the most vulnerable areas into your system, right? Because right now somebody is running probably a password cracker on everybody's, on this call's passwords on some system or another. They just run out there on bots constantly, across all the systems. They use dictionary checks and common word checks and social media checks, and it's not like some human being is doing it. They just set them up and they just run constantly. And like I said, against they pull back all the data from Google and everything, and they just run and run and run. And I know I've gotten emails saying we've cracked your password on something, and thank God they've always been on some site that didn't matter. It was like, they cracked it on some news, somebody I just gave them a password that I didn't really care about. So so that's why it's really important, because you don't want people to get a password on Google and get into your banking account, right? So passwords should be a minimum of 12 characters. They need to be a mix of upper and lowercase characters, numbers, and special characters. And those special characters are like the @ and the bang and the exclamation point, which I call a bang because it's a coder. You do need to change your passwords often. Often to some people means every 30 days. To some people it means once every 6 months. 30 days is probably a lot for most people. Every 6 months is probably too long, right? I would probably say 90 days is good. 120, 120 is probably okay, but just make it often. Do use multi-factor authentication. Hopefully everybody knows what that is, but if you don't, multi-factor authentication means that your password, or to get into a system, you need something you know and something you have, right? So you know your password, and then you would have something like your phone, right? Which you can't see because it's getting blurred out. So you would know your password, and then you would get sent a token to your phone, which is usually like a 6-digit number or a 7-digit number, or you would have some kind of program on your phone where you'd have to say, yes, accept it, that type of thing. And that's the idea, is that maybe somebody would get your password, or maybe somebody would get your phone, but most people wouldn't have both. Or if they got your phone, they wouldn't have your password to your phone. So it exponentially increases the decreases the likelihood that somebody's going to get into your systems. Do secure your passwords. There's password vaults such as LastPass and OnePass. Avoid writing down your passwords. This is just a funny joke, not a recommendation. Right? Avoid the names of your pets, your family, and your birthdays. People know them. They're out on social media. They're easily found out. So do not use those as part of your passwords. Again, avoid words in the dictionary, because like I said, there are crackers running constantly, and they run through all those dictionary words in all kinds of combinations all the time. Don't reuse old passwords, because they may have been cracked in the past, and they will continue to try those again. Avoid obvious letter replacements like 0 for O and 1 for L, because again, that's programmed into those crackers. Do not use data that you post on social media. Especially if, because if you are one of those victims of a spear phisher, they're going to go look for your social media and try to find out as much about you as possible. So they will, find that social media data and try to get into your accounts. Don't use the same password across multiple accounts. If they crack, if they crack the email that you use to get into the Wall Street Journal, you don't want them to then be able to clear out your bank account, right? Because if they, they get into the Wall Street Journal, good for them, they get to read the Wall Street Journal, but that's going to limit what they can do, right? They can't get into your Google account, they can't get into your banking account, they can't get into anything. But if you use that same account across everything, suddenly, your life is their life, right? Don't share passwords and avoid passwords that have been previously compromised. And you will get emails, and I think now Google will tell you too if like passwords have been compromised. I've gotten things like that. So you should know when your passwords have been previously compromised. You also don't want to have more privilege than you need, and you don't want your employees to have more privilege than they need, or to have your files on a system to have more privilege than they need. You want everything to be as locked down as it possibly can be. And this is called the principle of least privilege. And I just like the idea it's called the principle of least privilege. And the whole idea is if access is not needed, access shouldn't be given, right? And it reduces the chances of vulnerabilities in one application being used to exploit the rest of the machine. And the idea is, again, that you only run with the permissions needed to do a function, and as an employee or a person, you only have access to what you need to have access to. So, again, if somebody gets into your system and if everything, the access is all set up correctly, they can only get to, a limited amount of data because you have the access locked down. And say you have, Ken, who's, in charge of your fork trucks, and in your system, that's all you've given him access to in your system is the fork truck section. So if somebody hacks into Ken's account, they can't get to your accounts receivable data. Maybe they can wreak havoc in your fork truck area, but that's as far as they can go. And that's the whole idea of least privilege, is if Ken doesn't need access to the accounts receivable, if he doesn't need access to employee scheduling, don't give it to him. Don't give it to him, because once a month, somebody goes on vacation and he has to update it, then just give it to him for that period he needs it and then take it back away. The little bit of extra work helps keep your system more secure. And then why application and system management doesn't seem like security work. Keeping your systems and applications up to date and well maintained is critical to keeping your data secure. Cyber criminals keep excellent track of vulnerabilities and versions of applications and OSs and what vulnerabilities they've had, and how they can crack into those. And that's why the next one is install operating systems and program updates, right? Because now with the internet, all those vulnerabilities are known like 5 seconds after they've been found, right? Which is great because then people start fixing them, but it also means from the time one is found, the clock starts ticking to how fast you have, how much time you have to fix them. Last December, there was a major vulnerability found in Apache, and I call it the Christmas killer because, like I said, at that point I was working at the bank, and pretty much all of December was just devoted to updating systems, to patch that thing as fast as humanly possible. Because again, you're fighting, you're running against the clock to get the systems updated before anything happens to that, for anybody exploiting that vulnerability. And that's exactly right, because as soon as you know about that vulnerability, malicious actors know about that vulnerability. So keep your, back up your systems regularly and keep everything updated. And, install anti-malware software and run it often. If you have a website, keep your software and the themes and the plugins patched. Same reason, delete any that you're not using. Keep your security software up to date. Make sure you have the latest antivirus, patches in there and the files and that type of thing. Delete any unused or unnecessary user accounts, because again, that's how they got into Colonial Pipeline, right? Somebody had left the company. I'm not sure if they left the company or it was just an unused account, and they were able to exploit that. Use complex passwords, and don't perform sensitive tasks over public Wi-Fi or unencrypted connections. And again, it's, a virtual private network is, a good idea. What it does is a virtual private network is an overlay network built with virtual tunnels, and the tunnel payloads are encrypted and authenticated, right? So it exists over the existing network, and the clients connect through the tunnel in the internet to the VPN server, and it prevents data sniffing and disclosure of the private information. And so it acts a little bit like that SSL certificate from web server to the client, but just for like all your data going back and forth to your server. Okay. And then there's firewalls, which stop things at the server side or in front of your internal network, right? So you can have a personal firewall, which would be kind of on your server itself, and it will usually protect the computer on which it's installed, right? And it allows a security policy to be defined for an individual computer, whereas the normal firewalls control the policy for the whole network, right? Macs and PCs both have built-in firewalls to prevent malicious attacks, but you can purchase additional tools for, more advanced firewalls that you can then either block traffic. You can basically either say, I want to block this certain type of traffic, or you can say, I want to block all traffic and only allow, I only allow this type of traffic from these ports. You can do it either way. You can say, I'm mostly open and I'm just blocking these few things, or you can say I'm mostly blocked and I'm only allowing these few things in. So firewalls are a way of enforcing access control policies, and they do packet inspection. And like I said, they can stop if you have the right monitoring in place with along with your firewalls. They can see odd behavior. From big corporations, they generally will have a firewall with specific ports and access open. And then they'll have their internal network, right? And then for really big corporations, they'll have an external firewall. They'll have servers in between where their FTP servers, their web servers, and their mail servers live, and then another firewall, and that's called the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. So it's neither as exposed as the internet, nor as protected as their internal network, right? So they'll have ports open out to the world, and then they'll have ports open into their internal network, and this DMZ in between, which is very, very highly monitored and very highly controlled to make sure that things aren't getting through. So here are some additional resources for you to learn more about cybersecurity, and along with this presentation today, we're going to be sending out a pamphlet which does a really good job of going into a lot of cybersecurity topics and resources. So hopefully that'll help you learn more about cybersecurity. And does anyone have any questions for today?
Before we dive into the questions, just a quick one. I just want to inform our wonderful attendees that I did posted a 30-second survey about today's webinar. Remember, we at Tempo SBDC, we always cherish your feedbacks, even as it helps us in improving and providing the services we give to you guys at a low cost. So kindly take 30 seconds of your time to help us to fill out the survey link I just posted. In addition to that, please, a copy of the PowerPoint and the link to the recording will be sent to all the attendees. So just take your time and everything will be fine. Thank you.
Yeah, and I see in the comments where someone mentioned the security issue with LastPass. Now they do say that no user data was accessed because again, I'm absolutely sure they have that firewall and DMZ situation set up. So hopefully that's true and that no user data was accessed with their breach. But anytime, I mean, those things do make me nervous, because you are putting all your passwords in one place. I do have a tendency not to just use one because I don't like the idea that if somebody got into one site, they were getting everything. But that's just me. I'm a little paranoid.
Okay, guys, I'm just gonna give 2 minutes to see if 1 or 2 questions will come up on board. But if any doesn't show up, I guess we'll just cut it off for the day. But even as we also wait for the questions, Cassie, I don't know if we have any that we are yet to answer.
Yeah, and I saw there was a question about
Any others?
hiring a security officer to manage your cybersecurity. There are different credentialing organizations out there. It's not an easy job to be a cybersecurity professional, right? Because they do need to be able to keep up on all the latest threats. And so it's really sort of depends on, I think, the size of your business, how much they need to know. Most universities do like a cybersecurity certificate. And I think if you're a small business, that's probably a good thing for them to have if you're hiring them. If you're a very large company or you have, dangerous products, then they probably should have at least some years of experience in the field.
That's the only question I have seen so far. And then there's been, other resources. I appreciate all the resources that people have shared as well.
Yeah, I put in the resources some information about VPNs and like a review of different VPNs. McAfee's fine, right? If you already have McAfee, it might be the cheapest way to go about getting a VPN. So that's something to look into.
Okay, because I can see a lot of resources coming up to for the cybersecurity. Thank you guys for bringing it up, and thank you guys for sharing. Like I said, I will be giving this 2 minutes. I guess I've exhausted my 2 minutes, but I am going to add like a minute to see if anyone comes in, and the same 1 minute. I just want to use this opportunity to thank each and every one of you guys for keeping it a day with us. Sheila and Cassie, thank you for a wonderful presentation. And of course, I also want to use this opportunity to say a shout out to my Temple SBDC colleagues for their wonderful support and encouragement. Without them, we wouldn't have been here. Guys, thank you. I'm going to say thank you for the last time. Thank you to exhaust my 1 minute. Guys, in the absence of any other question, thank you guys for keeping it up. Thank you guys for keeping it a day with us, and do enjoy the rest of the day, please. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.